This isn't the will of the victims. This is just one person making a decision, and it doesn't reflect what we were asking for.
The father of Kaylee Goncalves furious after Bryan Kohberger accepts a plea deal that takes the death penalty off the table. I look at what this means, how the plea deal came about, and what it means for the victims' families. Welcome to Crime Fix. I'm Angenette Levy. He did it. Bryan Kohberger has accepted a plea agreement where he will plead guilty to murdering Maddie Mogen, Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. For nearly 3 years, Bryan Kohberger has denied through his lawyers that he had anything to do with the murders in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. He denied he was the man in all black with bushy eyebrows who walked into that house on King Road in Moscow with a knife, a huge K-bar knife, and murdered those 4 beautiful college students. But now, something has changed just in the last week or so, probably around the time that Judge Hippler denied Kohberger's request for a continuance and denied his request to introduce evidence that 4 other suspects carried out the murders. Kohberger's lawyers apparently approached prosecutors last week and asked them if they'd be willing to take the death penalty off the table in exchange for him pleading guilty. Now, Kohberger may be admitting to the crimes, but that doesn't mean there aren't questions. And I, for one, have many, many, many questions, and I would like to get those answers. Actually, I'm kind of demanding to get those answers. For one, where is that K-bar knife? Where are the clothes that Bryan Kohberger wore that night? Who was he targeting that night? Was it the house or a specific person? I, for one, have always thought that Maddie Mogen was his intended target since he went into her bedroom first. I believed he didn't expect her best friend Kaylee Goncalves to be in the bed with her, and that Kaylee probably woke up and that threw off whatever sick plan he had in his head. I think that plan spiraled out of control, and so did Kohberger. He lost control and killed 4 people to silence them so they couldn't lead to him being captured. I think he's somebody who wanted to be in control and demanded to be in control all of the time. The evidence was stacking up against Kohberger. He bought all black clothing, including a balaclava, very similar to this one at Dick's Sporting Goods. This is where I bought this one. It's very similar. He bought a K-bar knife, sheath, and sharpener off of Amazon 8 months before the murders. His DNA was on the snap of the sheath. Actually, this inner part of the knife sheath, the snap right there. It was very similar to this one, and it was left next to Maddie Mogen's leg. Kohberger drove a white Hyundai Elantra seen in the neighborhood at the time of the murders. His phone was off during the murders. Victim Kaylee Goncalves, her family, they are furious, absolutely furious about this plea deal. They wanted Kohberger put to death, and there was no guarantee that that would happen if he was convicted. They posted on Facebook on Monday, "It's true. We are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They have failed us. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. We appreciate all of your love and support." Now, the family then released a very lengthy statement. It reads, "The death penalty is merely an illusion in the criminal justice system. When available, it serves as a bargaining tool for the state, and when rarely applied, it's never enforced due to a highly inefficient appellate process. The notion that someone can plead guilty to a crime and still face years of appellate delays reveals a systemic failure. The Latah County Prosecutor's Office's treatment of our family during this process is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. We questioned decisions early in the investigation. Why was the mayor commenting on the case? Why was the coroner speaking to families? Why was an officer with less than 2 years' experience leading the investigation? Why was the University of Idaho involved when they declared it an isolated off-campus incident? Why was the university permitted to write a book about the incident while others were silenced under an overly broad order? As a result, we were branded adversaries. So it was no shock how the Latah County Prosecutor's Office mishandled the plea deal. They vaguely mentioned a possible plea on Friday without seeking our input and presented the plea on Sunday. Latah County should be ashamed of its prosecutor's office. 4 wonderful young people lost their lives, yet the victims' families were treated as opponents from the outset. We weren't even called about the plea. We received an email with a letter attached. That's how Latah County's prosecutor's office treats murder victims' families. Adding insult to injury, they're rushing the plea, giving families just 1 day to coordinate and appear at the courthouse for a plea on July 2nd. Who do they think they are? After more than 2 years, this is how it concludes, with a secretive deal and a hurried effort to close the case without any input from the victim's family on the plea's details. Our family is frustrated right now, and that will subside, and we will come together as always and deal with the reality that we face moving forward. Once again, we thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers. Our content shows you just how important your personal safety is, and that's especially true when it comes to protecting your privacy online. You would be absolutely shocked at how much of your personal information is out there, like your address and phone number. Ever wonder why you get so many spam calls and emails? That's because this information, it's all public. That's where our sponsor, Incogni, comes in. It's a service that helps you take control of your online privacy by removing your personal data from data brokers. Those are huge companies that sell and trade your info without your permission. Incogni actually found more than 50 brokers with my information, and here's the kicker. These data brokers have to remove you from their database if you ask them to. Now, you're probably thinking, Angenette, who in the heck has time to contact a data broker? Well, that again is where Incogni comes in. They contact those companies for you to get your online safety back. You don't have to do a thing, and then they alert you after the request has been completed. After signing up, I get virtually no spam now, so I highly recommend giving Incogni a try. Right now, anyone who uses code CRIMEFIX at incogni.com/crimefix gets 60% off. That's code CRIMEFIX at incogni.com/crimefix for 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Now, Steve Goncalves appeared on Banfield on News Nation on Monday night. Take a look.
This is anything but justice. This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that work their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%. But the men in the boots on the ground and the women that were out there working, I want to honor everything that they did for our children, 100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury. Not his peers. So that's where we are today.
Steve Goncalves also had some very strong words for Bill Thompson, the Latah County prosecutor.
Absolutely zero. None. Could be no farther than how we believe. I want my community support. I want that jury to make the decision, not Thompson. Not some old man who's 70 freaking years old deciding how my daughter's life weighs in a courtroom. That is not justice. That is not justice at all. I'll take my juries, I'll take my peers all day long. I'm sick of one man deciding, or one woman deciding, what a life's worth. So that's how I stand on that.
But not all of the families feel the same way. Ethan Chapin's mother, Stacy, told a Boise news anchor that the Chapins will be in Boise tomorrow, July 2nd, in support of the plea bargain. So the Chapins are supporting the guilty plea. So in fairness, prosecutors make decisions like this all of the time, but a lot of the times they sit down with the family members and meet with them more than once to discuss these things. And sometimes it takes many, many hours and more than one meeting. So why now? And why the rush to get this hearing done just a few days after notifying the families? What's the rush? There are still many, many, many questions to be answered. Okay, so I'm bringing in Mark Weaver. He is a special prosecutor in the state of Ohio who has prosecuted death penalty cases, and he also practices in the state of Pennsylvania. Mark, we were originally thinking about talking about these Pennsylvania witnesses. Now we're talking about a plea agreement. A plea agreement for Bryan Kohberger. And this is something we've discussed before about possibly taking the death penalty off the table in exchange for Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty. So your reaction to this latest development?
Well, your viewers know from our previous conversation that we anticipated this would happen. The more evidence of guilt, the more likely the defense counsel comes to the table and says, Can't we cut a deal here? What's a little surprising is that the prosecutors took this deal, given how much evidence they had that Bryan Kohberger was the person who committed these murders.
They've been saying for months now, and it's been kind of interesting to watch Ann Taylor's evolution, that she was standing up in court, kind of pounding her fist on the table, that he's innocent. He's innocent. And of course, this is her client. She has to defend him and stand up for his constitutional rights. But it seemed like the more we learned, we were learning, the worse it looked for him, the more we learned as far as the evidence goes with the Amazon click data, the purchase of the knife, the balaclava purchase, which, whatever. The bushy eyebrows, the description from the roommates, seeing the guy in the all black, the balaclava added to that, the white car, the DNA on the knife sheath, all of these things, and then the Google searches. And then Ann Taylor kind of shifted. Her demeanor seemed to shift once they got to Boise, once they got to Ada County and they got the change of venue. And Hippler seemed to really drop the hammer on them a little bit. I kind of feel like I should call him Hippler the Hammer. But she said he maintains his innocence. She kept saying our client maintains his innocence. And we were hearing kind of that he was difficult to deal with. What makes Bryan Kohberger suddenly just say, yeah, I'll plead guilty instead of going through a trial?
Well, we're all trying to look into the situation behind a curtain that we can't see. But a defense counsel who changes her tone like that probably didn't realize this other evidence was out there, that her client had been telling her a story, that she perhaps believed it. Although an experienced defense attorney should be skeptical of everything their clients tell them. And so for her to change her tone like that, either she was just learning about this new inculpatory evidence, or she realized how ridiculous she sounds by loudly proclaiming his innocence when the evidence, which you detailed pretty effectively there, when that evidence was stacking up.
And I left out the cell phone evidence of his cell phone being turned off right before the murders, the cell phone's off and not reporting to the network over that time period that covers the homicides. And then, the stargazing alibi that they tried to get past the court. There was a lot there. There's a lot circumstantially.
Well, it's worth complimenting the investigators because there were no eyewitnesses to these murders. We don't know anybody who saw the murders happen, and they weren't on video. And so old school police work, taking little pieces of evidence and building them and grabbing them from all these different areas, build a pretty strong case.
Mark, Steve Goncalves, we haven't heard from the other family members, but Kaylee Goncalves' father, Steve Goncalves, is furious, absolutely furious. TMZ is reporting that Xana Kernodle's aunt, Kim Kernodle, is upset by this. We haven't heard from Maddie Mogen's family. We haven't heard from Ethan Chapin's family. I keep checking for updates. But Steve Goncalves is furious. He said he told News Nation they have a regular Friday meeting with the prosecutors to just an update on what's going on with the case. The possibility of a plea agreement was brought up last Friday on this Zoom call, and they said absolutely not. They would not be on board with that. Zero chance that they would support that. They wanted a trial. They wanted Bryan Kohberger to get the death penalty. They've been very vocal about that. And then Sunday, they get a letter saying, guess what? There's going to be a plea agreement. He's going to plead guilty to all counts in exchange for the death penalty being taken off the table. Whoa. Is that how you would have handled this as a special prosecutor who has prosecuted death penalty cases?
Probably not, but let's start with, let's wait to hear both sides. This family has every right to be emotional and upset. I'd like to hear what the prosecutor has to say before I reach a conclusion about whether this was handled right. But I will say this, in my most recent death penalty case, which was last year, we had two different factions in the family of the victim, and they had different viewpoints on the case. And so my colleague, Ray Grogan, and I met with the family repeatedly, both factions, sometimes separating them in different rooms because they were of different minds. And we wanted them to be able to have the strongest possible say about what happened. Having said that, in each of those meetings, we gently reminded them that they are not the final decision maker about the charges, that we represent the state, and that we have to make the best decision. But I would have never dreamt of telling that family that we were going to reduce the charges to life in prison, which is what we did in that death penalty case last year, by letter. You don't do that to people. If that's true, I want to hear what the prosecutor says. If that's true, that they found out about it by letter, that's not the way you handle the family of a murder victim.
So Bryan Kohberger, we don't know how long he's been thinking about this. We do know he's awakened every day for the last 2+ years in a jail cell. He's somewhat intelligent, although how this crime was carried out doesn't suggest that he has a lot of common sense. I will say that. But he does have a certain level of intelligence. So he's had to have thought about this. And he may think he's smarter than everybody else. I don't know. I don't know Bryan Kohberger. I just know what we've read about him. What makes him just decide? I mean, I guess the lawyers, I've talked to defense attorneys who they probably had a come to Jesus meeting with him or several come to Jesus meetings with him. The defense, we've seen this in other cases, Mark, too. We saw this recently in the Chad Dorman case, in the state of Ohio, where his attorneys right before trial went to the state and said, hey, will you let us plead, he'll plead if you take the death penalty off the table. And the prosecution agreed to spare the families a trial. That decision, it makes me wonder, how does that decision come to be? Did they just throw in the towel, I guess?
I've never been a criminal defense lawyer, but I know lots of them. And what they tell me is that sometimes the client, the defendant, needs to just sit with the facts and let it soak in and realize that they're not going to win this case, because early on, they're very energetic. We can beat them. I've got all these great arguments. And defense counsel, good ones, know deep down which cases are losers. This case was going to be a loser. Having said that, for those people who are angry about the death penalty being gone, and I understand that. I've been involved in a lot of death penalty cases in my career. I would remind them of this. One juror can stop you from getting the death penalty. You could go through the entire trial and get one juror who says no, and you're back to square one. And if you do get the death penalty, that the appellate process is such that you will not see an execution for, even in a state like Idaho, 10, 15, 20 years, and one federal judge can stop it and turn it back around, whether it's a post-conviction relief or habeas corpus proceeding. And so it's hard to get a death penalty case to stick. And so sometimes prosecutors say, if we can get this, we can guarantee he's in prison for the rest of his life, and his appellate rights are almost zero.
What do you expect at sentencing? Obviously, there would be victim impact statements. What do you expect there?
I have been troubled by this judge's gag order on these families. I have argued...
the families aren't subject to the gag order. Some of them have chosen just not to speak.
Yeah, it's been interesting how we've not heard from these families as much as I thought we would. I want their voice to be heard in court in these victim impact statements. Anybody who's been previously gagged, I do think the gag order was a little broad in this case. I think ought to be able to be heard, whether it's in court or to the media afterwards.
Mark, are you surprised that the families learn about this plea agreement on a Sunday, and then there's kind of a rush to get the hearing done, several days later?
We've not heard from the prosecution about what communications they gave to the victims, so I'm open to hearing from that. But the calendar is obvious. They're rushing to the plea agreement. There's no reason to rush. This is a death penalty case. This guy's not going anywhere. There are no deadlines. Now, the judge does have to worry about seating a jury and pulling the panel together. You can manage that a week or two out from trial. And so I don't know why they would be rushing to get this done by tomorrow. Oh, there's a holiday coming. That's not a reason either. Just put it off till next week. The victim's family need time to sit with this troubling decision for them. As I've said many times before, as someone who's worked on death penalty cases, there are some strong reasons why it's a good idea to take the death penalty off the table. You get a guaranteed result. You get almost no appeals, and you get some closure and measure of justice. The notion of rushing it, and some people can't get there quickly enough, for their own personal situation. Some of the victims' families might not be able to be there. The judge ought to be worried about that. Every victim family who wants to be there should be there.
Mark Weaver, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we're going to stay on top of this. We're going to try to get all of our questions answered. We're going to demand that our questions get answered. And we're going to be looking into the evidence in this case and working to get it for you, to show it to you. I'm not talking about graphic, gory crime scene photos. I'm talking about possible interrogations, body camera footage, things of that nature. So stay with me here on Crime Fix. And that's it for this episode. I'm Angenette Levy. I will be in Boise covering this hearing for you. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. I'll see you back here next time.